the heart has between 30 and about 120,000 neurons in it. People with 30,000 neurons in their heart instead of 130,000 neurons in their heart are often the ones that are labeled cold-hearted.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
Right. And the ones who are young at heart have got more neurons in their heart. So
Makes sense.
we can influence the number of neurons that we've got in our heart, use it or lose it. Same scenario.
Yep.
If we're not practicing being emotionally available, if we're not young at heart, if we're not joyful, we don't have those neurons and they go away. They physically go away. Therefore, we're left with only the ones that make us cranky and crazy and disconnected from people, right?
Yeah, good.
There is also neurons in the gut. So the gut has the same amount of neurons as a cat's brain, which is like several hundred million. So to me, that suggests a level of intelligence.
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gasiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Hello and welcome to Recovery After Stroke, a podcast full of answers, advice, and practical tools for stroke survivors to help you take back your life after a stroke and build a stronger future. I'm your host, three-time stroke survivor, Bill Gasiamis. After my own life was turned upside down and I went from being an active father to being stuck in hospital, I knew if I wanted to get back to the life I loved before, my recovery was up to me. After years of researching and discovering, I learned how to heal my brain and rebuild a healthier and happier life than I ever dreamed possible. And now I've made it my mission to empower other stroke survivors like you to recover faster, achieve your goals, and take back the freedom you deserve. If you enjoy this episode and want more resources, accessible training, and hands-on support, check out my Recovery After Stroke membership community. Created especially for stroke survivors and caregivers, this is your clear pathway to transform your symptoms, reduce your anxiety, and navigate your journey to recovery with confidence. Head to recoveryafterstroke.com to find out more after this podcast. But for now, let's dive right into today's show. This is episode 162, and it contains coarse language and material about sexual abuse of minors. My guest today is Dr. John A. King, who is a sexual abuse survivor and is living well with post-traumatic stress disorder. Dr. King is also an author, poet, longtime activist, and founder of the Give Them a Voice Foundation in Texas, which he launched in 2015 to provide advocacy support, resources, and rescue for those who have been sexually abused or trafficked. Dr. John A. King, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, great. Nice to be here, mate. Appreciate it very much. Cheers, Bill.
Pleasure.
Cheers, Bill.
Cheers, my friend. I know it's Scotch o'clock or whiskey o'clock over there, wherever you are.
Yeah, it is, mate. 4 p.m. You're on coffee. Sorry, mate. You got a couple of hours. It's Saturday over there, isn't it?
It is. Welcome to the future, my friend.
Well, let's see how that goes for you. Give me the lotto numbers.
Well, I don't gamble, so I can't do that. So we'll leave that.
Neither would I, but I'm telling you, if Guy gave me 10 numbers, mate, I'd take $1 and check a chance. I would, mate.
Hey, fair enough. You got a pretty cool name in that there's been some really important Dr. Kings in our history.
Yeah.
Especially in the United States of America.
Yeah, there is, mate. So I got blackfella in me. So I'm from the Bundjalung tribe up in Byron Bay. So Second Fleet Australians came over here and they were kangaroos or black women. That was about it. So there's always a little bit of that mixed in there. And it's funny, I was a little bit too white. I'm too white over here and not quite black enough over there. So it was interesting coming over here and telling people, on the other black meat, Australian First Nation stuff. And you mean like, no, you're not black. I said, well, mate, look, we're a little different. Like, we've been at this thing a little longer than you folks. So, there wasn't a lot of us between the Irish and the kangaroos. There was nothing much going on. So, yeah, appreciate it, mate. Martin Luther King's a legend.
Yeah.
I've got nothing in common with Billie Jean King at all. I'm not female, a lesbian, or a tennis player.
Yeah. I was going to say you can't play tennis. Yeah, I get it.
No, I can't, mate.
Hey, I find it interesting what you said, that blending in, not quite doing it there and not quite doing it here, or not being quite white enough and that kind of stuff. I am white. When I'm in Australia, I don't feel like I'm at home. I get called a wog, and I get called all sorts of things by the Anglo-Saxon whites, and then when I go to Greece to visit my family, where they're all from, where my parents came from, I get called an Australian. And it's like far out. Like, I have got an identity crisis. I don't know exactly where I fit. And I felt more at home in Greece just because of the reception that I get there is a warmer reception than the one that I get here. Not that I get mistreated on a daily basis here in Australia. It's just that, I don't know, they're warmer in their welcome. So I really understand what you're saying. Like, I totally appreciate that. Is that, does it get in the way of how you feel about your homeland, and then how you feel about your adopted land?
I think what gets in the way is people's really stupid attitude towards race. I think that's the thing that I find most annoying. And I remember growing up in Australia, we really didn't have a problem. There was black fellas and white fellas. I'm a bit older than you, mate, at 57. So it wasn't until the 70s when the Black Panther came over and started to tell us that we had a challenge between each other that a lot of that came out. I think Australia's views on race have been crafted by external forces and media. True, there's been a lot of mismanagement of Indigenous people in Australia. I think there's been an incredible amount of opportunity as well. I remember Kathy Freeman came forward and she did all that. She to me wasn't an Aboriginal runner. She was just an incredible human being.
Oh, man.
And there's always been that sense in Australia that you can do that. And the same with it in the footy. Especially playing rugby, growing up, the Ellis brothers, they were just incredible football players. And you didn't find out later until Lionel Rose, they didn't find out later until, these are now Aboriginal icons because we're allowed to have such things. They were just great Australians doing a great thing. Over here, culturally, it's, to be offended over race or have an issue over race it's like a palatable thing. It's a cashable thing. It's an item, a thing, a card you can play. And I find that really frustrating because it speaks to a victim narrative. You just can't succeed and excel as a human being. You've always got to talk about, and white privilege is BS, mate. Like, you and I would be considered white privilege. Well, I am mixed race. You would be the same. And we've fought for everything we've got. Everything we've got. Male privilege. We've fought for everything we've got. We're scrapped every day to get up and make it happen. And they've reduced any conversation down to an issue of the exterior as opposed to the interior. Everyone's living their life from the outside in as opposed to the inside out. And I think that's the real challenge I have with any of that. Being put in a box, stereotyped as one thing or another. And I think it's an attitude that applies to life, Even in the space of PTSD, I've never been comfortable calling myself a victim of sexual abuse or a sufferer of PTSD. And you're probably the same concerning stroke. That's something we've gone through. It's not who it defines us as men. It defines us as people. And yet there's people who, for want of financial gain or social recognition, that's the thing that they hang their hat on. I am a this. Well, I'm not any of those things, mate. Depends on the day. Most days I'm just irritable.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Most days you're just irritable. So that means are you difficult to be around?
Well, I don't know. Yeah. Everyone pisses me off.
Fair enough. You own it. I love it. I like to identify as a stroke survivor, and I talk about stroke as something that I experienced in the past. I do. And the community that I speak to talks about being a survivor as well. And I think that helps a lot, especially when somebody doesn't understand what the sort of communication or the way to communicate to us about stroke, that if they haven't had a stroke, is they'll say you're a stroke victim. And it's like, no, I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor.
Yeah.
I'm getting through that. And it does shift the way that you then approach the rest of your entire recovery, because
that's good.
It comes from a place of being able to survive and move on, rather than a place of being victimized and feeling like, why me? And going down the path of, I'm a good person, God, why did God do this to me? And having those conversations. I've had conversations with people like that I coach who have said that, and it's like a really difficult place to bring them out of. It's a really difficult place to get them to move away from, so that when they're observing the world through their new lens of stroke recovery, they have clear view of actually what needs to be done, how to move forward, where to progress to, how to make the most of what they have, rather than sitting in isolation, just wondering about how terrible, life has become or can be from here on. So your story, your post-traumatic stress story, is pretty, the part leading up to today that I read about you was pretty shocking. So what I realized is that post-traumatic stress comes from a beginning of something that is relatively shocking at different degrees for different people, depending on what they've been through. And what's interesting is that I asked my something like 4,000 Instagram followers whether or not they've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder after stroke. And the responses were stunning. I couldn't believe it. Most of them said...
I wondered, mate. Oh, yeah.
Most of them said probably have got post-traumatic stress disorder, but I've never been diagnosed and I've never seen a doctor about it. I found that tremendously stunning, because they know that they have a condition which is debilitating them, and they, for some reason, haven't done anything about going to see somebody to help them out with a diagnosis and move on beyond this. Now, that is kind of where I want to start the conversation. Do you?
Sure.
Can you explain that in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah. So there's post-traumatic stress. So PTS. So after a trauma there's a degree of stress in your life. Very simple. It's not complicated. So we all experience trauma at different times. Where it gets into post-traumatic stress disorder, or in my case, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So post-traumatic stress, trauma, stress that happens post a thing. So often people will go through a traumatic event, and that traumatic event might be a car accident, might be a robbery, might be, a physical attack or something. So after a period of time, most people get through a trauma within about 6 to 8 weeks. And when you're looking at post-traumatic stress disorder, it starts to get into the 6-month issue, where after 6 months you're having troubles with recall, emotionally placing, unraveling emotions. Now, and then there's complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and I'll touch on that before. I want to speak about the stroke community and just some thoughts on there. So complex post-traumatic stress normally happens with things like abduction, prolonged childhood sexual abuse, kidnapping, those things. So it's complex in its nature. It's a lot of different forms. Post-traumatic stress disorder is often talked about with police or veterans because there's a traumatic event that happens in a field, and then after that, there's a series of things which they cannot resolve, like little buckets they're trying to things. Now, if you think about the very nature of a stroke, how it impacts, I don't think you could tell me one area of your life that it doesn't impact. It's going to impact your self-esteem, your marriage, your ability to have intimate relationships, physical intimate relationships, verbal relationships. It could affect your sight, your mobility. You're talking about a cataclysmic life event on some level. Now, there are people who have mild strokes, there are people who have extreme strokes, but it's still a traumatic event. One of the challenges I have when dealing with veterans is that they'll come back from war situations and they will have a traumatic event that happens over there. But a lot of them have had, especially the war fighters, the elite guys, Delta Rangers, Special Forces guys, about 85% of those guys have had childhood sexual abuse. Now, when they come back from war and they're trying to deal with what they saw on the battlefield, they can't talk to their people in the VA, the Veterans Affairs over there, here, about what happened as a kid, because that'll take away their benefits and they'll lose all of that stuff. So they never resolve what happened on the battlefield because they can't talk about the root issue. Now, here we go. Hey, listen, here's my wife. Yeah, say hi to Bill. And the rest of us, yeah, hello, here we go. That's the missus. She's blushing now.
Hello.
Cheerio. So, interrupt us anytime, love. It's not a problem. So,
I'm leaving that in there. I love that.
So when I forget what I talk about, I was just
the veterans that can't talk about their sexual abuse because they've had.
Yep. All of this other stuff.
Yeah, and they'll lose their benefits.
So, and the thing with an issue like something like stroke is you've had this event. Now, unless you can, and I'm sure you know people, Bill, more so than me, especially in your space, that are trying to recover and overcome this. Unless they realize and come to a point of acknowledging the impact that it's had on every area of their life and are prepared to unpack that. I know when I'm in my book, in Deal With It, I talk about John 1.0 and John 2.0. And the difference between John before the recall of what happened to me as a kid and afterwards was me accepting that I was a different man because of what had happened in my brain. Now, I'm sure there's conversations in your community about the impact on the brain on neurological functions. But what about emotional functions? What about the way your brain was changed because of the impact of this trauma? So if you're talking about it in terms of the physicality and how it impacted your life, but you're not talking about it in terms of how it changed your brain pattern, changed you emotionally, then, mate, I just can't see that people can get 100% whole again.
That is a very interesting thing that you say. So that conversation came up as well. So I've had that conversation with the people that follow me. One of the questions was, I put it out there that stroke is a 3-tiered recovery. It's physical, it's mental, and it's emotional.
Very good.
And the question was, which one are you not attending to? Nobody said I'm not attending to my physical recovery, or very, very few people said that.
Yep.
And then most of the people said that they weren't tending to their mental recovery and their emotional recovery. And emotional recovery was the one that was the most unattended.
Okay. That's interesting. That makes sense in a lot of ways because it's that least seen, that unseen impact. But if you think about, and I'm sure you've seen this in your own life emotionally, our interaction with the rest of the world, ourselves, our view of ourselves and the world, when we're not attending to those things that are most private and most important, then it affects your ability to recover physically, I would imagine. Because if you're not emotionally in tune, if you're not mindful of the space that you're in, then you're not going to give attention to your physical recovery because you're not in a good space in here, and I imagine it would flow over everywhere else as well.
To give people an insight into whether or not they're in that space, the space where they're not attending to their emotions, because some people might actually not know that they're not attending to them. And if they're dumb like me, like I was, basically they think they are, but they're not. They're just doing it at a very superficial level. And what I had in my life before stroke was I had a lot of pain and suffering. It was all mental anguish that I was creating as a result of not attending to emotional issues. And the mental anguish was creating physical ailments that I was feeling in my body that I thought was as a result of me bending over the wrong way or picking up that box in the wrong direction or whatever.
Got it.
So then what was happening was I was constantly going on the loop of never being happy, always being mad, never having enough time, always complaining about everything in my life, although there was abundance of everything.
Yeah.
And then what happened was I had the stroke and my head switched off completely because there was a baseball-sized clot inside of it. And as my head switched off, I started to notice this strange sensation in my chest, kind of near where my heart was.
You're fucked, mate. Your head's gone and your heart's gone. I'm fucking out of here, mate. His head's crazy.
Pretty much. You know what it was? It was my heart was actually coming online for the first time in 37 years. And it was going, hey, great. I'm here. Pay attention.
Yeah, and that's great.
It took me months to work out what the hell it was. I was experiencing heightened emotional responses, crying like a baby over like a cat tripping over the gutter or something like that. And, it's associated.
Those Kleenex ads on telly, mate.
Yes. The little dog, tripping over the the toilet roll or whatever.
Stupid.
And it was associated to the pseudobulbar affect, which is an out of control response, an emotional response after stroke. So people, some of them have it laughing. They just laugh at things that are inappropriate to laugh at, like at funerals and stuff like that.
That's me. That's me being a dick.
So eventually I got to that point where I started to recognize there was something in my heart that was beyond the pump, that was just sending blood around the body. And I started to attend to it. And believe it or not, I was at counseling and in therapy for a good 12 years before that. So even though
Really?
I had to do something to attend to it, I didn't really actually know how to attend to it, how to do it still. It was still like this most amazing thing. And then that took my therapy to the next level, because when I was going to see my therapist, I would actually cry and I would actually express my emotions rather than express what I thought was happening about my emotions. I was actually speaking from my heart rather than with my head representing my heart.
Yeah, that's good, mate. Very, very cool. Look, I talk about it in my book. I don't know if you got up to the spot where I talk about the heart has a memory. And
No, I haven't, but I do know that. But tell me about that.
So there was a guy, he was a heart transplant surgeon in America, and what he noticed is that he would take these transplants. A classic one was a guy who loved classical music and refined food. His heart was transplanted with a young African American guy, and all of a sudden he started thoroughly enjoying chicken fried steak and hip hop music, and it was like, what the hell's this? I've never liked this stuff before. But the one that really got me was the story of the patient who got the transplant of a young girl and starting to get the memories of a serial killing, a killing that took place. And they actually took it down, wrote it down. They thought the parents were abusing a girl, but a police officer said, hang on, listen, there's some things here that are very similar to a case in the area. And they actually tracked down via her the recall of this person, the murderer. Because the heart does literally have a memory. I don't know what your faith. I'm a Christian man, and it talks about the heart being the seat of courage, the seat of faith. And so it's literally not only a physical organ, but it's an organ that contains the same neurons that we have in our brain. They're connected. And this series, and when we, as you said so eloquently, we disconnect these two, and we're operating only out of the cerebral one, which is a very Western way to do things, as opposed to operating out of this sense of unity. And I think a lot of that disconnect causes the stress that leads to things like heart attack, stroke, breakdowns mentally. But when these two are in union, there's literally this yin and yang flow of energy, emotional, spiritual, where we can start to see the world differently. And that was part of my thing when I went from John 1.0 to 2.0, was realizing the import that I'd been carrying around these emotions for years of suppressed memories of what happened to me as a child. When the recall came back, it affected me here because it changed the way that the cranium functioned, my brain functioned, because it was a totally different set of emotions that I'd ever had before.
Okay. Wow. So that's it. You've nailed it right now. Firstly, let me just say this. The heart has between 30 and about 120,000 neurons in it. And what has been shown is that people with 30,000 neurons in their heart instead of 130,000 neurons in their heart are often the ones that are labeled cold-hearted.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right. And the ones who are young at heart have got more neurons in their heart. So we can influence the number of neurons that we've got in our heart. You don't use it or lose it. Same scenario.
Yep.
If we're not practicing being emotionally available, if we're not young at heart, if we're not joyful, we don't have those neurons and they go away. They physically go away. Therefore, we're left with only the ones that make us cranky and crazy and disconnected from people, right?
Yeah, good.
There is also neurons in the gut. So the gut has the same amount of neurons as a cat's brain, which is like, I don't know, several 100 million. So to me, that suggests a level of intelligence
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
There that we are not taking advantage of, but we refer to it all the time. So we often say, I took gutsy action, right?
Yeah.
And we often say,
gut instinct. Yeah,
my gut instinct. And I pushed through the fear, right? And we use these words like I wear my heart on my sleeve. And we're referring to those organs all the time in our language, and it's cross-culturally. It happens in every culture in the world. And yet we're still able to be completely disconnected and not understand the origin of those words. And that's what I was. I was just this walking piece of meat in, a bag of bones that had no idea where his words were coming from, how they were formed, what they were impacting. If my words were impacting anything, I had no idea that they were. So I had this whole loop of being disconnected in the head. The mental anguish was causing physical pain, which was causing emotional pain. The head switched off. I started to notice my language, where it was coming from. I started to notice my heart was online at the same time. And then as a result, I got to this point of being able to go, okay, there's more to life than just working stuff out with my head. I've got to work out what's happening in my heart. But for a lot of men and women, but I'll say men because I do see this a lot in men, and there's not a lot of men interacting on my space. And there's not a lot of men that I can get on the podcast. It's mainly women. They're much more likely to go to those places of emotional distress and talk about it and overcome it, whereas the men seem to not as much. A lot of the men fear the pain that's going to be exposed. The one that you mentioned, which was it's dealing with that stuff that happens in your chest and understanding that. A lot of men fear that going there, and then as a result of that, they don't. But they don't know that just on the other side of those fears that pop up and those emotions, like just on the other side of that, dealing with that is like a completely different feeling, which is not painful. It's relieving, and it takes a weight off the shoulders. Can you talk to that a little bit about like what stops us from going there?
I think a couple of things. I think we live in a very dysfunctional era as far as gender and gender roles. I think, it's people have lost their mind on that stuff. So the concept of a warrior poet is historic. The Bible figure of David, a warrior and one of the greatest songwriters of his time and his era. And the Spartans, incredible poets and songwriters, incredible warriors. I think there's always this thing of the warrior poet that is in the heart of a man. Women talk about things face to face. Men talk about things shoulder to shoulder. So women will sit around and have a cup of tea and have a chat and talk about all their emotions and feelings and stuff like that. You'll be sitting down watching the footy with a guy, and you'll say, how's the family, mate? And he'll go, yeah, not too good. And you've got this fraction of a second where you've got an opportunity to have a conversation. And in that fraction of a second, if you go, oh, really? What's going on? Then you're going to have hours of conversations. You'll all get half cut, and you'll end up smoking cigars for the first time and hacking up your throat, and you'll have a real in-depth conversation. But there's those little moments, and that's why men that work together, men that go to war, men that face obstacles, men that even go and even do a sport together, they'll have those conversations. But we're expecting men, by the very nature of who we are, to have a conversation the way women have a conversation. We're just not. We're just not wired that way. We won't do it. We're not going to sit and share our feelings and shit with a whole bunch of people we don't know. And even around the home and the family, even with my wife's very verbal, very emotionally warm, embracing, great lady. But if we need to get to talking to things, we'll go for a walk, or we'll go work in the garden together. Because I know if I'm going to chat, I need to be doing something. Because somehow doing something with this opens up my ability to be able to communicate what's in here, even if it's just going for a walk or whatever. So I think and a lot of that stuff is poo-pooed by people. Oh, well, that's just men, they're closed. Look, men are just different. We're just different. We're wired differently. We want to protect our families. We want to die for our families. We want all that sort of stuff. We're just wired totally different. I think we mentioned Jordan Peterson beforehand. I think that's one of the great things that Jordan Peterson has done for a generation of men, is said, yeah, you're different. And that's really all he's saying. And you've got to get in touch with who you are. Because for the last 50 years, we've been focusing on the other 51% of the population instead of talking about everyone across the board. So I think I find guys actually very emotional and very prepared to talk about their emotions, and particularly these war fighters that I deal with. So my background's different: childhood sexual abuse, never been a veteran, and I'll talk to some of these guys who have been in the biggest theaters of war in the last 40 or 50 years. And they'll read my story and I'll read theirs, and they'll say, man, I would never swap my shit for your shit. And I say the same. So let's talk about what's in common. And there's never a dull moment, mate. There's not a coaching appointment I don't do. There's not a barbecue I don't go to. There's not an event where I don't spend hours and hours talking to men who want to freely talk about it, because we're acting in an activity together and we found a shared commonality.
I love that. So as soon as you said that they do it shoulder to shoulder, yeah. I've just done an audit of all the conversations that were meaningful to me, where I was being mentored, or I was mentoring somebody, my sons or whomever, and every single one of the ones that actually made a difference was actually us walking together, and I had no idea about that. My youngest son, who is the hardest nut to crack, emotionally, and have conversations like this, the uplifting ones, he will not sit face to face with me under any circumstances if he can avoid it. I've taken him on a walk maybe 2 or 3 times. He avoids it like the plague. But if I take him on a walk and we're talking shoulder to shoulder, we get a very different level of communication that I don't experience him with him in his 21 years. I've maybe had 3 deep and meaningful conversations with the guy that he hasn't instigated.
My boy Noah loves movies. If I know I need to connect with Noah, we'll watch a movie. We'll sit down and watch the movie shoulder to shoulder, engage in an activity together. At some point it'll be, hey, listen, man, I want to have a chat to you about this. It might be 90 minutes later and we'll have a chat, because we've done this activity together. There's something, men bond in motion. When women can bond static, men bond in motion. They have to be involved in something together. Now, you told me about the trammies and their lunchtime thing and all that sort of stuff going on in Melbourne.
I'll give some context there. So in Melbourne right now, the tram drive, the tradies who work on the large construction sites in the central business district were asked by the government not to eat their lunch in the sheds on site because of coronavirus. They were asked to eat their lunch outside. And there's hundreds and thousands of these guys, and they work in the open, they work in the sun, they work in the rain. So they go into the sheds to get out of the elements for a little while. And as a form of nonviolent protest, what they did is they took their tables and chairs, they installed the tables and chairs in the middle of the central business district roads, in between tram lines, buses, traffic, and hundreds of people had lunch in the middle of the roads in a central business district. Picture your central business district and hundreds of people sitting at tables and chairs eating lunch on the road. That's what happened. So I just wanted to lay the context there. Tell me about those guys.
Well, here's just my thought on that. So by the very nature of what they do, every day is spent shoulder to shoulder. And one of the activities they do, they shoulder to shoulder, and they sit around a table And even though there might be face-to-face eating, they're now engaged in another activity of after having spent years together or weeks together, and here they are sitting down having. You're not only removing the whole comfort thing, you're removing male community. You're removing this sense of bonding and the ability to have a conversation and process what's going on in the world, and how the way guys do. Guys love a shed, mate. Guys love getting together in a shed, woodworking, playing darts, looking at old pin-ups, whatever it is, and they get together and there's this sense of safety, a shared but a closed space where they can have these conversations. So you start to take those things away and you start to demasculate a society. You start to take all those elements around and, the sheep will just roll over and say, well, I'm not going to do that. Well, thanks very much. Well, let's comply. But there's another lot of say, piss off. All I want to do is sit down and have my chips and my fish with Bob and have a chat about the world. And that's where a lot of their life is processed. That's where marriage advice. I remember I was a young fellow, I was working as a truckies offsider in Sydney. And some of the first advice I ever got on relationship was from this old fella on his third marriage, talking about the things he did wrong in his first two and the things he got right in this one. Sitting in a cab with a young 16, 17-year-old kid who was way too young to be working as a truckies offsider. But as you said, that's where it happens. Now, they were great, incredible, rich experiences for me. And you can't take that away. And that's what these guys, they're being robbed of that ability to be able to form community and have conversations about the things that are important to them. Now, you take it over into the PTSD space. You take it into the stroke space, and you talked about there's a reluctance amongst men in your space to talk. Man, it's the same over here. Like it's not a dinner conversation. Hey, how you going, Bobby? Yeah, good, John. Yeah, what's going on? Just processing anal rape as a young fella. What was your day like? Oh, yeah, similar. That doesn't happen, mate. You just know it's never going to happen. So whenever you get those shoulder-to-shoulder opportunities, and you can facilitate those, just like you did with your son, I often do it with my clients. That's an incredible way, particularly with dealing with men, to get them to open up about the stuff that they face every day in life.
Right. So the other thing that I realize is perhaps one of the reasons they also don't talk about is just reading the first couple of pages of your book is who do you talk, how do you lay that on somebody, that information that you have about what happened to you in your past, whether it's the guys on the battlefield or you through your sexual abuse as a child. Like, how do you lay that on somebody and have a conversation with the person who you love the most, who cares for you the most? Because that's pretty heavy information to lay on somebody in your home, your wife or whomever, or even maybe a sister or a family member.
Yep.
And is that another thing that gets in the way of men or of anybody actually overcoming post-traumatic stress? Is that something that really locks it in place and keeps that cycle happening of pain?
Great question, mate. Great question. So, I talk and deal with it again about it because this is one of the things I had to deal with. There was a point where my memories and what I went through had to go from scars of shame to medals of honor. And it was simply a switch that I had to throw inside. So you don't talk about your scars of shame. You hide your scars of shame, be it stroke, be it childhood abuse, be it not coping as a police officer, not coping with what happened to you at war. There's no forum to have those conversations. And I think that's one of the major malpractices that's happened with this pandemic bullshit is the absolute disregard for mental health. They all talk about it, but it's total bullshit. And I think part of the thing that you've got to do is you've internally got to lose your shame. You've got to lose your shame about being a stroke victim. You've got to lose your shame about the fact that your legs don't operate the way the next guy. You've got to redefine your normal in a lot of that. And when you get comfortable with the fact that hey, listen, man, these are medals of honor. I've survived. I've got through this. I'm prospering. I'm not a broken man. I'm John 2.0, and I love who I am and I love my life. Then you can talk about it like it's an old football game. Then you can talk about it, and it takes all of the emotional weight off it because the emotional weight is really shame. The emotional weight is feeling like you're less of a man, less of a human being because you went through these things as a child as a victim of, as a survivor of stroke. We went through those things, and that actually is a great impetus because it normalizes a conversation that is normally, it's normally abhorrent. It's like, I can talk about what happened to me because it made me who I am, and I'm really comfortable with me.
I've had people on the podcast who have had a stroke 10, 15, 20 years ago and haven't spoken about it to anybody. And the first person they spoke to about stroke was me on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there stunned, completely stunned that after 20 years, this amazing lady hasn't had the opportunity to have a conversation with anybody about her stroke. And apparently she doesn't know anybody around her that's had one or said they've had one, or she hasn't noticed anybody. And it's not uncommon. 1 in 6 people will have a stroke in their lifetime. And I think the number is being changed to 1 in 4. So I just find that stunning that you would go through life for such a long time, never discussing the elephant in the room. Like, it's in the room. I mean, you can see it every single day. You walk through it, you hit it, it knocks you out of the way. Like, it's there every day. How could you not talk about it? That's a great skill.
Yeah, it is. Hey, mate, listen, I've got people I've talked to who've been married for someone for 20 years, 30 years, and they've never told them what happened to them as a kid, or why they have a challenge with sex, or why they can't be intimate, or why they wake up every night with nightmares at 2 or 3 a.m. and have to go outside for a walk. Never. Got a partner who's lying there going, hey, I just got nightmares. All right, just nightmare. And to pop that bubble, to let someone into that heart realm and have an intimate and honest conversation is a level of vulnerability, and courage. Vulnerability is courage. A level of vulnerability in there, a level of opening up. But as you talked about earlier on the other side of taking that step is going to be authenticity, integrity. It's going to be authentically wonderful, or it's going to cause a relationship to fall in a heap because it's not really authentic. It's built on a lie. And I think that's the fear factor, that people are scared that if they open up their life and talk about something, and it's only a fear factor if it's a shame for you. If this is shame for you, if this is a shameful thing, you're embarrassed because you have a hitch in your get along. You're embarrassed because sometimes you laugh out loud in public. If I was having a problem with laughing out loud, I'd print a card saying, I'm sorry, I'm a stroke survivor, and occasionally I just it's like Tourette's, this is my situation, this is my problem.
Yeah.
Own that stuff. Own that stuff. And if you own it and it's yours, then really it's up to everybody else to give you grace and room to be like that. It's not on you anymore. The moment it's you, all that judgment becomes external. It's no longer internal. It's not your problem. Not your problem.
So what you're saying, in fact, is external judgment is less impactful.
Oh, totally.
If there's no internal judgment.
Absolutely. It's when you go and someone, it's like the who gives a fuck. It's like, the whole thing of I'm all out of fucks. I don't give a fuck. At some point, you're so busy concentrating on having a tremendous, wonderful life and becoming whole, you don't care what anyone. Now, does it still hurt? Does it still rattle your cage every now and again? Of course it does. But the reality is it no longer has an impact. Or it has an impact, but you can mitigate that impact by being aware that it's theirs. So let me tell you a little story. So as a kid, I went to a dentist, and he was the saddest. And he pulled out my back teeth, and I passed out, and I woke up and I had semen on my face. So, ridiculous, horrible things. And I hated going to the dentist. Now, everyone, doesn't like going to the dentist. But, man, I had a deal. I had a real deal. And once I started to understand that these are no longer scars of shames, but a medal of honors, I remember going to this dentist, and this was the nicest guy in the world. But I walked in I came in with my wife, and I said, listen, man, look, you're a nice guy, but I want to tell you about a situation. This happened to me as a kid. So I need you to understand I need my wife in the room with me, and I need to hold her hand. I need to be able to see her at least. And I'm going to tell you, I've got a problem with you because you're a dentist. Now, I don't have a problem with you, but because of what happened to me as a child, this is what my propensity is. And just having that conversation pops the bubble. But here's the other thing. It moves his response to him instead of me sitting there trying to second guess what someone's going to think if I punch them or knock them out because all of a sudden I'm in the middle of I'm a 13-year-old boy again, waking up and some guy's masturbating in front of me, and now I'm a 50-something-year-old man and I just clock this guy because I'm having a flashback. I'm caught in a moment. It moves everything away. Now, if this guy says, well, no, you can't have your wife here, or I don't really care about your background, this is not what we do, it's like, well, screw you, buddy. I'll go find someone who will listen. It pushes everything to the external. I've owned my stuff. And if they can't accept that, if they can't accommodate that, then that's on them. That's not on me. I don't have to hold it in, worried and concerned about what someone's going to think of me if they said this. It's like, it's out there.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So a while ago, I was listening to a podcast called Conversations. The ABC in Australia runs it. And the guest was a lady called Sharon Zacks, and she's a dentist. And believe it or not, the conversation was about changing the way she goes about dentistry, because she realized that a lot of the people coming to see her were sexually abused and being on a chair in a dentist's office and having their mouth opened and entered for the sake of repairing teeth and penetrated for the sake of repairing teeth was extremely traumatic for some people, right? And she went about completely changing her practice and the way that she was approaching people and speaking to people. And as a result of that, she helped a lot of people through needing A, dentistry, but B, this situation of the trauma that they experienced in a previous experience. And it's a fascinating conversation that I was listening to, because you have to be a pretty special person to take dentistry to that level and get beneath the layers of, it's just, a tooth, we have to pull it out. Like, don't be like that. I'm just here to pull your tooth out. People like me are so naive about what can happen in different situations, because I've had a blessed life. Like, I've not been through any of the traumas that some people have other than stroke, right? And I find it hard to relay the information across to people who are suffering through previous life experiences, to find a way to break down the barriers of me supporting them or helping them, because I can't relate to them. But I found that struggle as a coach. People would come to me with an idea in their head of what they had to do, but couldn't connect to their heart, and therefore the coaching session would fail achieving the outcome, which was, to overcome this challenge that they were experiencing. But the coaching session achieved that even though it was a failed attempt to overcome this issue, it was an attempt, and hopefully with more attempts, you'll get better at addressing the issues. Is that something that you see that happens? Does it happen over time? Do these recoveries do they happen very quickly? How does it sort of evolve from somebody knowing that they need help to finally being on that other side, like you are, and you can observe it as an event that happened, not as who you are? It hasn't become you.
I think, and look, I want to speak to something you said there, in a nice manner, just to try and give you a different perspective. It's all internal. It's how I see it and face it. And again, that's on me. Like when you said you've had a blessed life and you can't relate, all except for what you've come with stroke. Hey, brother, I don't want your shit. Like, I would rather deal with 12 years of childhood sexual abuse than a fucking stroke. I'm just telling you straight up. I don't want what you've been through. It's like scares the shit out of me that I would have to face that. So what I do in my situation, with a warfighter or with someone like yourself, is, okay, we're two poles apart in terms of our experience, and a lot of people would say there's no commonality. Now, strip that away. We have a commonality. We've had to overcome some things, and as human beings and as men, there's this circle, this Venn diagram, and we can go to either end of those Venn diagrams, or we can focus on what it is. And so if you take that as a coach, and this is what I do, is I have a look at what our commonalities are as human beings, what we're trying to do and overcome, and we focus on that. And then it can go wherever people want to go. I can talk to someone who's been to Afghanistan. I'm dealing with mates at the moment that are dealing with that rubbish that's happening over there that the administration here did, and they're so traumatized by what's happening there. And so here I am with no experience, but man, I've got all the experience of being massively disappointed, massively let down, time and time again having to come up and face with things. So that's where the commonality is. And I think that's how you and I can have those conversations. Mm-hmm. So you find that commonality. And part of it is not denying the reality and the impact and the incredible guts it took for you to overcome what you did. And you own that as much as anything else. And I think that opens the door to have conversations about helping other people. And I think when they find people like us, Bill, and they look at it and says, dude, if this guy can do it, I can do it too. Mm. And that's really I hate telling my story. The thought of coming on your show and doing this, I hated it, Bill. I hated you. I hate everybody. I've hated you all day. It's like this fucking guy on LinkedIn asked me to a podcast. I hate this guy. I'm going to tell my shit. I hate it because I am not that stuff. And I don't like talking about it because it will probably take me a day or two to overcome it.
Right.
But by coming on and being vulnerable and being prepared to talk about it, I'm hoping I give your listeners a chance to and permission to overcome whatever it is they're doing. So if the testimony of the story of my life can mend 1,000 others, then that is a price that's worth paying. And I think that's where we get our freedom and our power to speak greatness into other people.
For somebody who doesn't like to talk about it, you've written a book, documentary.
Yeah, I know.
So
everywhere I go, oh, you're the guy who got anally raped with plastic soldiers. Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, nice to meet you. Yeah, appreciate it.
I call bullshit on that, but anyhow, I'm just being smart.
No, but it's true.
I know.
Look, it is.
I know.
It's just one of those things you do, mate. You run at something.
I know. I do share the story of my stroke and my experience with stroke when I interview people to create context and to relay the story as a result of somebody else sharing their stories to see what the similarities are. And it's not about me. The episode is about every person who I interview. It's about them so that they can share their story. And before I realized, it's like, so I can be maybe the first person they've ever spoken to about stroke. Like
that's great. That's incredible.
That's amazing, right? So it's like, but I do share, and I suppose I don't really like sharing the hard parts, but there's some good parts in my story as well that I think are really relevant and worth sharing and laughing about, right? So we do that. So that's quite fun. But I'm in the process of writing a book, and I'm finding that I get stuck, and it becomes very difficult sometimes to go back and to somehow create context of other life experiences, put them in the book. Tell me about your journey to writing your book. Was that early on in your sort of big awareness situation?
So 2008, 45, mate, I was walking out of my shed. At the time, it was a beautiful day. Daffodils were blooming. When I was a kid growing up, every time I walked to school after having a horrendous time at home, there was this one particular house that bloomed daffodils. And every year I would see these daffodils, and I thought they were the most beautiful flowers I'd ever saw. I'm getting a bit teary now even thinking about it. And I would see them. And what struck me is that every year I would see these daffodils, I thought, I've survived another year. So 2008, I'm walking out of my shed, beautiful. I can remember, it was a Thursday, beautiful blue day. I looked down, and I remember the last words I said, which were the last words that John 1.0 ever existed. I looked at the daffodils and said, they're beautiful. At that moment, like a flood, everything came back to me. And all these little frames of 8mm film finally came together, and they played in my head, and they didn't stop playing for 5 years of everything that happened to me as a child. It just went on going. So that was in 2008. So here I am in 2015, and unfortunately, I'd lost my marriage, my first marriage, estranged from my kids. I was running a very successful corporate coaching company. I was running a church over here in America, training young business leaders and a range of other things. And I'd lost all of that. And I was sitting in an apartment by myself with a mattress on the floor just after a divorce. And some people, so here I'm a Christian preacher, and these Buddhist monks found me on Twitter because I was anonymously posting poetry about the impact of sexual abuse on men, because no one else was. And they said, look, you're a bit of a unicorn. You're male, you're a poet, and you're prepared to talk about this stuff. Well, I was anonymous because my kids were very young. And so they wanted to come down. They were doing a documentary, Stopping Traffic. They came down and they did it. And, I talk about it in the book. I just said I needed to do this thing. And Melissa was helping me at the time, and my current wife. And she said, don't do it. I said, look, I've got to do it. I just feel I've got to do this. So they shot this thing. 2 years later, they came back, and we ended up with this multi-award-winning documentary, with Dolph Lundgren and a whole bunch of Hollywood celebrities. And I thought maybe I'd get 2 or 3 minutes in it, but they decided to make my story the centerpiece for this thing. So we're doing Hollywood scene, and we're doing all these showings and red carpets and all that. And I would be asked time and time again, how did you overcome it? What did you do? And I got tired of retelling the story. So I took 2 boxes of cigars, 6 weeks, and sat in my garage in Texas at 115-degree heat, and wrote Deal With It, and that's how I did it, because I wanted to get it down, get it down once, and if I could help one person, show them, it was selfish. I wanted to stop talking about the story. So it had exactly the opposite effect. But I wanted to help. So when you talk about, here you are, documents, it's like, yeah, whatever, that's true. I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing. God leads me down this path, and here I am. And you're the abuse guy. Fuck off. No, I'm not. So cigars. No cigars were hurt. In this process, they willingly gave their life for the cause, and so I ended up writing Deal With It, and I didn't know that Deal With It would be the incredible success or the tool that it has been. And I think that's what you'll find with your book, mate, is there's something about putting something down where you open up your soul and you pour it out, and people can pick up your soul and they see themselves. It's reflectory. They can see themselves in the mirror, and they connect on different levels at different parts. And that was really the reason I did it, because I didn't want to keep talking about it. And I thought, if I've had to, I've never prayed or said, God, why me? I've only ever prayed and said, turn this around for good, and deal with it as part of that journey for me. The documentary is. I also did another documentary on recovery on PTSD called Light in the Darkness. Another group did that, and it's gone very well as well. But it was because why have we gone through what we've gone through, Bill? If it's not to benefit and help other people, what's the point of it? The tragedy, the trauma, the impact, the loss, the struggle. If someone else can't benefit from it.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I remember getting a little bit confused early on. I discovered a couple of things that were helping me overcome fatigue after stroke, and I shared that with a lady who was a stroke survivor, who I thought we were on the same wavelength. She was just a local. We used to catch up at the cafe nearby, and I kind of just said to her, I noticed that when I don't eat sugar and carbs, I don't have fatigue as bad, Yeah. And I thought that I was saying the right thing, but apparently not, because after that particular interaction and me discussing what helped my fatigue, she cut ties. She didn't want to talk to me anymore.
Really?
All that kind of stuff. So I thought maybe you're not supposed to talk about this stuff and just keep it to yourself. And I just left it at that for a little while. But because I'm a problem solving kind of a guy, I was discovering a lot of things that were helping me to overcome the problems that stroke created, right? And I needed to tell people because I wanted to test whether it was a fluke or whether, in fact, I solved this little problem of mine. And if it happens to you, maybe it's legit. It happened to me as well. So, tell me. So that's kind of where my sharing started from. It started from like, I just discovered this thing. You need to know about it. Tell me if it happens to you so that we can have this experience together and we got something in common.
Yeah.
So I find a lot of comfort in sharing what I know, but more importantly is learning what other people know about stroke recovery and sharing that, because I don't know everything about stroke recovery. So I get this amazing group of people come on here, and they're all strangers. I've never met them before. I've only found them because they have the hashtag stroke either in their bio on Instagram, or they posted about it. And they come on my podcast and they want to do the same thing. They just want to share. So it sounds like that we are all here to support and help each other rather than tear each other down and make life difficult for each other. But sometimes even I miss the cues of when it's time for me to be helping somebody. Like I take some interactions as threat because I process them through my bloody head instead of connecting to my heart to understand these people are reaching out for support and help. And I take them as competition, and I take them as all these things. And I freaking hate it later. But when I'm doing it, I don't realize that I'm being an asshole.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. I found mindfulness a great practice. The practice of mindfulness, of learning to be in the moment. They call it meditation, which is whatever, man. I'm not going to sit them across my legs and go, oh, my bum gets too small. Yeah. My mindfulness is in a garage with a cup of coffee at like 5 o'clock in the morning and a cigar. I'll sit there and I play my little meditation, my mindfulness stuff. And I've learned that what that does is just help me align these two things. Mm-hmm. Because I'm the same. Well, we're competitive guys. We're competitive before our trauma, and we're competitive afterwards. And I think being attuned to that, and how much impact we can have, and the audience we've got, the privilege we've got of being able to share our brother. You're sharing a story about stroke where some people that they couldn't even cut 2 or 3 words, and you're in a privileged position to change, steward, and lead your community. And I feel a little bit the same. It's like every time, loath that I am, I get to share my story, or someone comes back, and it happens every day, Bill. It happens, maybe that's an exaggeration, every week. Someone sends me an email saying, look, your book changed my life. Your book kept my marriage together. And it's like, I'm still getting weepy now about it, thinking about the emails I've got where my vulnerability, my pulling the scab off and taking a risk, it saved someone else's marriage, whereas mine was destroyed by this. Yet my sharing my story saved someone else's. It's like, I wish I was there for me, yes. Which is really interesting, because no one was there for me. No one wanted to talk about what it was like to be sexually abused. No one wanted to talk about what it was like, the impact it would have on a life and a marriage. And as a man, there was no resources for it. So,
I'm going to talk to, nobody wanted to talk about that. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But for right now, I'm going to tell you that Blair, if you're listening, thank you so much for your email. So Blair, I'll just leave it at that. I won't give his other name, contacted me 2 emails ago to say, I listened to your podcast. Thank you so much. That was it. He just told me that he had experienced a bleed in the brain similar to the one that I've had because of an AVM. And he's 33 years old and he's very early on in his recovery. And he just reached out to say, thank you for the podcast. And it's like, far out, man. It's what I was missing that I didn't have. And I'm so glad that you have what I didn't have. That's amazing.
That's fantastic, man. Yeah.
I just can't believe it.
Here he is at 33. You're now at 40, I think you said, getting in your 40s. And
47.
You've saved him 47. Mate, we've saved this guy, 14 years.
Yeah.
Saved him 14 years.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. So with regards to not talking about stuff that we've gone through, people not wanting to talk about it. I mean, especially with sexual abuse, this is just me sort of putting out there like a hypothesis. Is it possible that it's so unbelievable what happens to children sometimes that an adult who would never perpetrate those types of crimes on a child hears a story like that and says that is impossible to have actually happened because
happens all
adults
the time.
Don't do that to kids.
So here's the horrible thing about this. You can have a conversation about a woman being raped or a little girl being sexually abused, and people will talk about that. But if you cannot talk about a boy being sexually abused, particularly by a woman, they don't want to have those conversations. They will tell you, boys like sex, they enjoy it. This sort of thing doesn't happen. Mate, this happened like 2 weeks ago. Some Philistine was prepared to have that conversation. You know, I didn't respond well. It wasn't my most graceful moment. I told them to go fuck themselves. And you know, that'll still be my response tomorrow. But they don't want to have that conversation because, and we've done presentations around the whole issue of keeping kids safe is a seminar we do for community groups and how to do it. We've been in meetings. I've shown a trailer from that movie, told my story, showed the statistics, and I've had parents stand up in the room and say, that's rubbish, that does not happen in our community. I'm thinking, you're a moron. There's 2.4 million sex slaves in America every year. Okay, at the height of the African-American slave trade, there were 378,000 people at the height of it every year. In America today, 2.4 million people. And people go, no, it doesn't happen in our community. Well, you're an idiot. You know, and that's what I'll tell them. You're an idiot and I don't get invited back, you know. So because I'm not going to, it's just wrong. They don't want to have the conversation. And when they're confronted with it, it's talking, okay, so let me make fun of stroke victims because that's really politically correct. All right, you've got some guy with a gangly arm, dragging his leg, drooling, can't hold a conversation, at the middle of a funeral, and Tourette's and whatever. No one wants to talk about that because it's just fucking embarrassing. They don't want to talk about that. And why it's embarrassing for them is because they're ashamed of their response. They lack all compassion whatsoever. They're embarrassed, they're ashamed, they're uncomfortable. So they want to push that ugly thing away and not have to talk about the cripple guy. They don't want to make a conversation, give room or accommodation for the girl who's going to sit and drool over there. It's like, well, take that ugly thing away. And it's the same with the sexual abuse stuff. You know, with the mental health issue, you know, some scars are visible and others aren't. I remember when I started going through this thing, I remember saying, God, I wish I had cancer. I wish I was a paraplegic because I'd probably still be married because then everyone, my wife, my kids, whatever, would have been able to point, well, Dad's got cancer, and they would have received all this support. Now, even in the stroke community, mate, it's like, it's unseen. You've got a gangly leg, you drool, you're mentally not function, you're not handy. It's like, man, that's uncomfortable for me. I just need that to go away because then I can continue with my life being normal and I'm not affronted with something that's happening in the life of someone else. Because if I am affronted and I accept that affront and I realize that what's happening to me when I see it is not pleasant, is not embracing, then I have to examine myself. And that brings me back to the scars of shame in the middle of honor point. I think if we're going to change the way people view mental health, and I see stroke as part of that handling that trauma, is we've got to be prepared to have champions that are going to push back a little bit and say, no, that shit doesn't fly. You can't put that, can't say that.
I love the reframe that you just made a couple of times there about it, the other person is ashamed of their response and their lack of empathy and their lack of being able to facilitate a way of supporting this person. That is an interesting reframe for me. It just speaks to me. That completely makes sense because I know the people that didn't come to see me and didn't ask about how I was when I was in hospital, you know, half dead. Yep. Actually, it wasn't about me. It was about their inability to be in that space with me because they had only ever experienced the other space, you know, the healthy, laughing, not unwell,
vibrant, outgoing. Yeah.
And then as a result of that, they are they're in this other weird space that they don't know how to be, so they don't turn up. And initially I was annoyed and frustrated and maybe even angry that some people didn't put it out there that they were interested to know how I was. But then I was like, that was the best person in the world not to come, because to have that kind of energy in my room, I'd rather have him not there. Yeah. And that was another kind of amazing intuitive thing that they did to support me was not turn up.
And that is a great reframe of that. There's a difference between being alone and lonely. Being lonely is one thing, but being alone. A lot of things with recovery, you've got to walk alone. Look, it all happens in this 6 foot, 2 foot bit of meat here. It all happens in here, mate. All of my recovery is happening here. I have to take response for my negative. I can celebrate. I can celebrate the successes outside, but it is all happening in here. And I think that's a very important understanding. It does. People can support you, Bill. You know this. The therapist can support you. You can go and see a physiotherapist, and they say, go home and do these exercises. If you go home and sit on the couch, you're not going to get better. Mm-hmm. It all happens in here. So, and so all the recovery happens, all the struggle happens, all the victory happens, all the shame, or the defeat, all happens, 6 foot by 3.
In my language, is that in my language, that's me taking responsibility for that part of it, not outsourcing that part to somebody else.
Good. Yeah,
is that the part that you're talking about doing alone? That thing that is my responsibility, my action steps that I need to take.
So, and this is where it would be interesting probably for you to think through with your community. There's two things. I talk about it again and deal with it, but in my own life, I talk about instances and episode. If I have an instance, that's when I'm so PTSD. It changes the ways your brains are able to process information and emotional energy. So most people have little buckets of emotion. So they get these little buckets and they're all together. You've got a work bucket, a home bucket, a sex life bucket, with the kids bucket, all that sort of stuff. So when you and if you've got a rattling at work, you can normally leave that bucket at work, come home, it might froth a little bit, but you can go home and deal with everything else. So with PTSD, if I have a shake in my home life bucket, it affects everything. It's like a pebble in the pool, and the ripples go everywhere and goes everywhere and affects every aspect of your life. And I think what happens is the same thing happens with. Okay, so if I've got one thing happening in one area of my life, it's going to affect and run over. So if I have an incident, it happens in here. I'm having an incident. I'm not coping with the situation. I'm out in public. There's a lot of people. I'm feeling threatened. I'm concerned. But it really happens internal to me. So that's what I define as an incident. An episode is when it impacts the people around me. Mm-hmm. I start to not cope. I start to yell at my wife. I start to not cope about life itself. It's the same trigger, but how it manifests differently. Now you take that over into your space, and a lot of the people where they're saying, well, that's just because the thing happened in the brain and it's just a stroke thing. Man, I'd want to unpack that a little bit more, because a lot of those things have gone from being personal incidences, now it's manifesting out into an episode that affects everybody else. So I think there's that progression that happens with emotion, the progression that happens with interaction. And that was a very big understanding for me when I started to realize that all of this happens in here. And if it's starting to impact people out there, I need to pull it back to a degree. And I've got to set up mechanisms that stop it going from an incident and manifesting in an episode.
You described me exactly. We spoke about it just a little bit earlier. Like before stroke, I was angry, shitty, had the whole negative emotional loop occurring that was starting from me avoiding my heart. It was impacting my mental health, my physical health. And then I was having episodes that was affecting my entire family in my four walls and then outside, because I thought that everyone else on the planet was the dickhead and I was the perfect one, until my counselor asked me that question: is it possible that you're the problem, not everybody else?
Bastard.
I told her to get fucked.
Perfect response.
Yep. She
told her to get fucked and then went home and had to think about it.
And then went back and told her she was right.
Yeah.
And I told her to get fucked in a way that two mates at the footy, like you and me talk, could say, fuck off. Like, how could it be me? And she started to laugh, did exactly what you did. And then she just pretended that That was it. She wasn't saying anything else after that. She just left.
Just moving on after, leave it with you. Yeah, leave it with you.
And then she was right. So what you've described is me exactly. I was having incidences that I was turning into episodes. And one thing that occurred to me now in reflection, and because you so eloquently described it for me, is one thing that occurred to me was that I stopped having episodes and I started to take ownership of my incidences, and then I worked through each incident and had less episodes.
It's exactly what happens. So if I feel something building in here, I think when you got a partner that, my spouse, Melissa, very supportive of what I do and what I struggle with. And I will tell her, I'll say, I'm not well. And she'll go, physically? I said, no, I'm not well. I'm not coping. And I'll feel it building, and it might be over something. And she'll go, okay, what do we need to do? Well, probably nothing. I've told you that I'm not well. So that lifts the shame lid off straight away. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now I'm vulnerable. So now I've moved from being shamed. I've now moved into a place of courage. Mm-hmm. I'm not well. Okay, I'm prepared and open to listen to it. Okay. It also gives me freedom and room. And this, not permission to be a dickhead, but freedom and room. That if I'm not coping with something, that we've already established that I'm not coping. I think the other thing too, Bill, is in the journey, when people like us start to get better at it, because everyone wants to get back to what their normal life is, the more that we can cope, the more they assume nothing's wrong with us. Instead of the fact that I know every day of my life going forward, I'm going to have to manage this thing. And she will forget sometimes that I hate crowds, that I hate going out in public. I don't like to be away from the house. I'm very fearful every time she leaves that something will happen to her. And it'll be like, I'll ring her and say, well, where are you? Well, what's going on? Are you okay? Are you safe? She'll go, I'm just at Walmart. I'm just up the road at the grocery store. Well, what's wrong? Well, what do you mean what's wrong? It's, for me, it's like the same thing I deal with every day, that she's got so used to our communication and with me coping, she forgets that that's just me managing it every day. And some days I don't manage it well. And so even being able to have those conversations of, babe, I'm the same guy. I'm just better at managing it. And some days I'm not going to manage it as well. So, it actually builds into a place of strength.
Stroke survivors have got a lot in common then, because
yes,
a lot of stroke survivors do not want to go into public places because of the overwhelm and the sensitivity to multiple things happening at the same time. The brain just can't cope. It has to switch off. So a lot of stroke survivors will isolate and stay away from the public. And I did that, especially loud places and people moving everywhere, and cars and horns and trucks. Like, they'll do anything they can to avoid that. It has eased for me, but it's not my favorite place to be still, a place where there's too much going on around me. The sensitivity, my brain gets overwhelmed, it switches off, and then I can't function. The rest of my body can't function. And then it's not enjoyable for me and the people that are around me. So I can relate to that part of not wanting to be out in public for different reasons, but I feel like the internalized experience is similar. It would increase cortisol, it would increase the heart rate, it would increase blood pressure, it would increase all the stressor responses, and put that person in a sympathetic dominant emotional state, and then there'd have to be some sort of a come down. And for me, the come down, it takes a while to get over. Like, it takes a few hours, maybe into the next day, before I can just fully recover. And that is, I think, what some people don't understand about me, is that I need a day or two or whatever to not be spoken to, not be consulted, not be asked, to just be me in my own zone, so that I can just reset. It's kind of like pressing the reset button. It's the only way that I know how to do it. And a lot of that involves quietness from the noise that's going on around me, whether that's noise, ambient noise, or just general run-of-the-mill kind of stuff. and life noise, and then I've just got to go quiet, and I've just got to sit, contemplate, and go back into balance. Try and avoid not going into parasympathetic dominance, so that I'm not doing the swing from being completely stressed to completely depressed, and then just try to sort of somehow slightly find the balance. And what helps for me is, one thing that helps a lot is food. If I have the wrong food when I'm shitty, it just gets worse.
Did you read, there's a part in the book where I talk about contemplating suicide after a Coke, a bag of Cheetos, and a Snickers bar. And I don't know if you read that part.
Not yet. No.
So I fly into Chicago, and so I fly into Chicago. I'm doing a meeting up there, and I'm feeling good about life. Like, okay, it's the first time I've been traveling after this whole recall stuff and all that sort of stuff. So I go into this hotel. It's 10 o'clock at night. The restaurant's shut down. I get a packet of Cheetos and a Snickers bar and a Diet Coke and go to my room. 15 minutes later, I'm on the top floor looking down into the atrium, having a look over the balcony, thinking about killing myself. And I caught myself and go, hang on, 15 minutes ago, you were fine. Now, what's wrong? So I spent the rest of the night reading up on orange food coloring, number 5, and the impact of sugar and anxiety. And that's where I've started to, and that nutrition has played a vital role in my recovery. I want to maybe suggest something to you, and maybe for some of your listeners. If you take the time and you have a list of the conditions and the manifestations of PTSD, and compare those to what you see as stroke. Because if you hadn't told me that you were a stroke, my feedback to you was, you're suffering from post-traumatic stress. Because the visual, the oral, overwhelmed of noise, overwhelmed by crowd, need to feel safe and protected, needing days to reset. All of those are classic textbooks, post-traumatic stress responses. So if you're over here and you're trying to treat your stress, your stroke, and you don't understand that you're dealing with symptoms of stress that has happened post a traumatic experience that has lasted now, the effects of which have lasted longer than 6 months, PTSD, if you're trying to deal it solely as a neurological thing, then you're going to miss out on the greatest opportunity to find healing. And everything that you have described about the things that you struggle with are exactly the things I struggle with. Our commonality is that post our stress, our traumatic event that was prolonged, and in your case led to times of confinement, which makes it a CPTSD thing. And I think it might just reframe things for you, and then open up an entire world of other resources for you. See you, brother.
Oh my God.
I think you're gonna enjoy the back half of the book.
I just don't even know what you just said. My God. That's just blown me away, completely blown me away. What you're telling me has completely blown me away, because I didn't ask that question because of me. When I asked it on Instagram, I asked it because of other people. And what you're telling me, what I didn't expect to hear. Yeah.
It's like Pigeon Toady made in that movie Storks. You ever seen that one? Greatest film ever. It's a kid's film called Storks. Greatest movie of all time.
Okay. That's
interesting, brother.
Heavy, my Lord. All right. I'm definitely going to be contemplating that one. Look, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I could talk about it. I could talk with you forever. You're my kind of guy. Do you know what I mean? And especially because we're not talking about how that footballer is terrible at football and that cricket player is terrible at cricket. We're talking about stuff that to me really matters, and I know that football is important for people and cricket's important for people, but sometimes it's a distraction for not having the real deep and meaningful conversations. And I find myself challenged when I go there with mates, when I miss that window of opportunity to ask the next smart question to take the conversation to the next level. And it's me that misses that window, and I get it, you know, and I'm all right with that, because sometimes they don't want me to go there anyway, so I don't.
No, they don't. Hey, I'll tell you something you might enjoy, mate, is look, in the book, at the end of each chapter,
put the book up for a sec. Let's just have a look at it.
There you go.
Awesome.
Hey, listen, if your people, just for your folks, mate, to give them a discount, 20%, it'll cover shipping. If they put in the code S2S, stress to strength, S2S, it'll give them a 20% discount. If they're in America, I'll sign it for them. They're in Australia, so nothing I can do about that. But at the end of each chapter, Melissa talks about what it was like for her as my wife to walk through that with me. And I think, you know, if you ever want to do a revisit, mate, maybe I can talk her into getting on the screen with me, because I think it'll be fascinating for people, is to hear about, so how do you do this as a couple? Because I'm pretty sure in the stroke community, it's the same as the PTSD community. It's seen as an individual thing, and the impact that it has on a marriage and a couple is not discussed. And our partners move into caregiver mode, and that's why my first marriage fell apart. They move into caregiver mode instead of staying in the wife and the spouse mode. And, you know, the thing is, when your wife becomes your mother, you can't have sex with your wife. It totally destroys the natural order of things. And when your wife moves into that caregiver, loving, and you become the baby and the victim, it destroys, it's particularly as a man, it fucks it all up. Like, you can't be, I've got enough, Shelly, mate, you've got enough trying to drag your gummy leg around feeling like shit about your manhood to even want to get a boner and get it on with a missus, which is your manhood, it is your masculinity, it's all about that. And it's the same with me. When I'm reduced to a crying, sniveling, snotty mess, and I feel like I'm an 11-year-old boy who's just been anally violated, there's not, I don't need a mother. I need a woman who'll speak to my manhood and my greatness and encourage me back out of that space. And like, mate,
that's a big responsibility for that person who doesn't have the skills, is it? And the understanding of how to do that. And that's what a stroke survivor caregiver give cops as well, whether it's a husband or a wife. They come home from hospital with this person who they have no rule book for, no support, no help. They just go, it's all up to you. And it's like, the doctors went to hospital for 10 years to know how to help somebody with stroke, and you're expecting me to do that overnight? Like, what are you talking about?
I know, mate. And they'll read this book and they'll come back and say, "Oh, John, you wrote a good book, but Melissa is exceptional." It's like, okay, but she is. And it's that reflection, because what they connect with is, and you put it really well, mate, is because when it happened to me, it was like that. And the same with PTSD. It causes this change in the brain. It causes a change in your brain with stroke, which is another thing you might want to unpack, Bill, is stroke is a change in the brain. PTSD is a physical manifestation of a neurological manifestation, a physical thing that happens in the brain.
Right.
Yeah. So your amygdala, your hippocampus, your flight and fight response, all those things which you say, well, that's just stroke victims. It's not, mate. It's not. It's a neurological change that happens. It's got a physical and an emotional and psychological manifestation. And Mel is very adept, and we've worked very, very hard. And unfortunately, it was at the sake of my first marriage. Look, I changed. I changed. On that Thursday afternoon, I went from John 1.0 to John 2.0. And this woman had been married to a totally different man for 20 years, 22 years.
Makes sense.
And now here's this different guy, and it's going, well, who the hell are you? Why are you crying all the time? Why are you throwing shit around? Why are you losing your stuff? Why can't I just go up to Target and you cope with me being out of sight? Why can't the kids visit your friends? Because if the kids visit their friends, they're going to be raped and killed by people. Because that's my overwhelming paradigm.
Right.
And it's been, and that's why I totally get it. Why my first wife didn't cope. Yeah. Totally get it. Totally understand. I was a different guy.
John, thanks for everything that you do. Thanks for agreeing to being on the podcast. I really look forward to getting to know you and to learn from you going forward. And I wish you all the success, man. You're doing great work, and I really appreciate it because I think I learned some things that I never knew about myself today. And I'm going to have a
I'm
really
glad.
big think about those things as I laugh nervously.
Hey, listen again, mate. Look, they can get it from a website. Use the code S2S, and let people drop me an email. I'd like to connect with them. Know they heard about it, and I want to take this. If you're comfortable, mate, we've got a pretty good network on social media, and I'll take this and push it all over everyone, mate, because I love what you're doing, and anything I can do to support you, Bill, going forward, I'd love to be there for you, mate.
Thanks for being on the podcast.
Cheers, mate.
All right, thanks for getting to the end of the episode. After the interview ended, John and I continued to speak for a little while, and the few minutes more of conversation that we had was worth listening to. So I've included it at the end of this episode, and please feel free to listen to the end of this next conversation. What we share is really useful. That's a wrap, man. Oh my God, what a conversation. You have just absolutely just changed my life, I reckon, because I didn't know that that's probably what I'm going through. I just did not know, John. No way of knowing.
Trauma, post, the
Yeah.
impact has lasted more than 6 months.
Yeah. And
It's not
physical
physical.
manifestation and a physical change in the brain. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow,
I know.
man.
And so I was in hospital for a bunch of shit, mate, like heart attacks. I had a mate commit suicide. I mean, a bunch of stuff. And I had a mesenteric thing down in here. And it was interesting the comments you made about the medical stuff and dentists. They go to school. I went in there and I had to tell these doctors very seriously, listen, I have this challenge. And you guys need to understand that this is a challenge that I have. And according to your Hippocratic Oath, you need to be aware of what, and I had this conversation, you need to be aware of what's going on, and you need to cater your care of plan care to what my needs are. And they were, these are the best of the best. I'm literally like 14 hours away from dying. And they're like, well, who are you to lecture me? I'm telling you, if you put your hand under this night skirt, no matter how sick I am, I'm going to beat your ass. So just be very fucking careful. And we had a couple of things like that happen. And at the end of it, this head surgeon came down and said, listen, I think we need to have a conversation. We've got no idea of the impact of trauma. And I said, no, you don't. You guys don't have a clue. And I think could you imagine if the doctors in the stroke community understood that this was actually a traumatic thing, and there was part of the care, the healing package on the other end was going to be to confront PTSD? Just think in your situation, how that would have sped up your recovery.
I think you've just, and I'm glad we haven't stopped recording because I'm going to include this in the end. I think you've just said something that's amazing. There's no doubt about it that in the stroke community, there are survivors of stroke that are also survivors of childhood abuse.
Yep.
So this has not made it better for them.
No, mate. No, you already have PTSD. Now, if you've got an underlying condition, a marital thing, a sexual abuse thing, you're a police officer, a veteran, brother, you can't deal with this up here without unpacking what's down here.
Mm.
You only get good fruit off a good tree. You can't get good fruit off a bad tree. So unless you're prepared to address the issues of the heart, because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, unless you could do this, you are never going to get good fruit off that tree.
Yeah. I totally get it. And I suppose that's kind of what I needed to understand about it. So I think it's also my responsibility when I'm dealing with stroke survivors to understand that the post-traumatic stress is not shallow. It's not just, you had a stroke and you've got post-traumatic stress. That it's multifaceted and deeply layered, and therefore in the past, and if they've not been there and I haven't, and I don't know how to facilitate them in any way about that, then I'm never going to achieve what they hope to achieve, which is a full recovery from stroke. And when I'm talking about a full recovery, they might still be limping. They might still not have use of one of their arms. They might still not be able to listen through one of their ears. But I've got deficits that are invisible, and I struggle with that because it's hard to describe to people what the stroke has done to my body because they don't see it, right? So but I still consider myself fully recovered from it, from the stroke, not from what it's done to me.
And I think that is going to be your biggest personal insight, is when you have a look at it and you understand that what you're actually dealing with and have been dealing with the majority of the time in your recovery has not been your stroke. It's been your PTSD. Because, okay, so you've got a limp, you've got a gammy leg, your arm's all fucked, whatever. But in here, you can come to terms with that, or that can get better. But in here, this is, if you're not dealing with this, you're not going to get completely well. I think that's probably going to be one of your biggest paradigm shifts. And I would imagine, I think this would be great to have a conversation doing like an Instagram live or something, or a Facebook live, and see what people's feedbacks are. Because I think if they can understand this, that what's happened in here has not been a stroke. Because even a stroke, by my understanding of it, limited that it is physical. So it's a physical blood clot. It causes something. It's a physical ailment. Yeah. We address the physical, but it's actually caused a neurological change. And that neurological change is a stroke. Is there going to be long-term effect? Yeah, it is, but they're going to be physical. But this neurological thing, this hippocampus, the fight and flight, the adrenal gland, this lack of moral compass. So here I am, mate, a Christian preacher. Okay, got a very strong moral compass. PTSD, I have no moral compass. I got none. That still small voice that people talk about, I didn't have it anymore, mate. I could do whatever I want and sleep well at night. It disappeared. I lost all inhibitions. Total immersement in risky behavior. Lost it all. And because it was a physiological thing. Well, it's just Satan. It's like, no, it's not, mate. It's my brain. It's totally different. And I think if people can understand that, I think you're going to help a lot of people, Bill. You're going to help a lot of people in this space, mate.
I hope so, man. I do hope so. John, thanks so much, man.
Pleasure, man. Peace and much grace, bro. Go well. Go and sit in the park outside in the middle with a whole bunch of trammies and piss someone off. Just because. All right, mate. Hey, bless you. Be best. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for joining me on today's Recovery After Stroke podcast. Do you ever wish there was just one place to go for resources, advice, and support in your stroke recovery? Whether you've been navigating your journey for weeks, months, or years, I know firsthand how difficult it can be to get the answers you need. This road is both physically and mentally challenging, from reclaiming your independence to getting back to work to rebuilding your confidence and more. Your symptoms don't follow a rule book, and as soon as you leave the hospital, you no longer have medical professionals on tap. I know for me, it felt as if I was teaching myself a new language from scratch with no native speaker in sight. If this sounds like you, I'm here to tell you that you're not alone, and there is a better way to navigate your recovery and rebuild a fulfilling life that you love. I've created an inclusive, supportive, and accessible membership community called Recovery After Stroke. This is an all-in-one support and resource program and is designed to help you take your health into your own hands. This is your guidebook through every step in your journey, from reducing fatigue to strengthening your brain health to overcoming anxiety and more. To find out more and to join the community, just head to recoveryafterstroke.com. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gasiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation consultation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.